Hello and welcome to another episode of Laptop Retrospective. And today we have the original X1 Carbon, almost, and I'll talk about that in a second. So, there was a lot of changes that happened from the original X1 to create the X1 Carbon, and one of them was certainly a thinner, sleeker, and kind of more subdued design than in previous ThinkPads. Some of the firsts for this laptop, for example, was the drop-down style hinge on the rear of the machine. That still went 180 degrees. Up until this point, the ThinkPad hinge had taken up some of the top case as well, but this was the first model where it was a drop-down design. A few other firsts was the actual inclusion of a glass trackpad. So even though it won't look like it on film, this has a very tactile feeling that is quite unique to other ThinkPads. They also have the same rubberized coating on the inside of the chassis as they do the bottom and top case. The feeling is identical. And it actually creates a very supple, very soft, and comfortable wrist experience, I have to say. It is not a hard or firm plastic. But because of that, you will have wear over time, like at the top of the case here. So now that we have this particular unit opened up, let's go through some of the basic features. This one does include your fingerprint reader. It does have a backlit keyboard, as you would expect on some of the higher end models. It does have dedicated buttons for the track point, as well as kind of the old style X220, X230 physical buttons up at the top. Now, before we go too much further, just one particular note about this unit is it is a touchscreen display. Now, the touchscreen display was offered in a 1600 by 900 HD Plus. This particular model removed the subdued LED indicator lights on the outside of the case. Not entirely sure why that was done, but it is a very fast way to identify if it has a touch screen without actually turning the unit on. So if you're buying it refurbished and it doesn't power up, check to see that if it has the status indicator lights on the exterior of the case. If it does not, then you're very likely looking at a touch display model. Up at the very top, of course, we do have our microphone array and camera, which you can see just up there. Nothing really to write home about. And as you can see, even with the drop-down hinge, we do have 180 degrees of opening. So let's go ahead and tour our port selection. On the right-hand side of the unit, we do have a Kensington lock adapter, USB, mini display port, headphone microphone combo jack, and SD card slot. On the rear of the unit, we actually have this plastic cover that can be removed for what would appear to be a SIM card if it is capable of that function. Now, I did find that this was not always easy to put back into place, so if this is damaged or missing, then I would not be too terribly surprised. On the left-hand side, we do have a rectangular standard ThinkPad charging plug. We do have the exhaust for the fan, another USB port, and a physical Wi-Fi kill switch. So let's discuss a few of the technical specifications. This came in 3 flavors of Intel 3rd generation UVL CPU. The i5-3317U, the i5-3427U, and the i7-3667U. Now, these CPUs, of course, due to the thinness of the chassis, are soldered on and are not user replaceable. All 3 of those chipsets are running the HD 4000 chipset. Now, it is also worth mentioning that on the inside of these are proprietary SSD drives, known as the SATA 3 short form factor drive. The maximum capacity drive that came with these units from the factory was 256 gigabytes. Now, If you don't want to find one of those proprietary drives, which many of you will struggle with, or just regional pricing is restrictive, there is an adapter that will allow you to use another drive. However, be prepared to pay a premium for that adapter because it is not used on a variety of machines. With regards to RAM, it came in either a 4 or 8 DDR3L gigabyte configuration of 10600, 1333. So whatever you get on your unit is soldered to the board, so make sure that you're happy with whatever it is because you are not upgrading that later on. Alright, so let's go ahead and tear this machine down so we can see how easy it is to take apart, service, and the very few upgradable parts. As always with integrated battery laptops, you do want to be going into the BIOS when the computer first boots, and selecting the option to disable the internal battery. That way you are safely working inside the machine without static discharge. Another way that you can tell if you have a touch model, by the way, is it came with Windows 8 by default. So if you see this sticker in approximately this location, it's probably legitimate. One of the other ways that you can also tell is on the top case, the ThinkPad I dot will be lit up. Anyway, let's go ahead and remove the screws around the outer edge, and then I'll tell you the step that you do next because it's not necessarily what you might think. Once all of the screws are removed, what you'll actually want to do is turn the machine upright yet again and open the laptop lid. At this point, take your favorite plastic pry tool or expired gift card, and you'll just want to go in around the top part of the case and pop the select few retaining clips along the edges. This is actually very easy to do. The clips are not terribly strong. Now, once you've gotten all the clips, this is where things get very interesting. So I suggest you lean the screen all the way down on the table as far as it'll go. And the entire keyboard is actually going to lift and hinge upward like this. And that is how you are going to open up this machine. The single keyboard cable is located right here and can be removed by simply and gently prying upward. Once this cable has been released, the entire top case can be removed. And if we examine the top case, we will see a variety of things. We'll see the track point module is easily replaced and it's cable routed on the back of the keyboard itself. You can see the connector cable for it up top. You can see the fingerprint reader, as well as, I'm going to guess, the Bluetooth chip is hanging out right here. They're both connected with a ribbon that runs up to the main board here and is taped in place. And then of course you have the glass trackpad, which is held in place with 4 screws and then is connected to the back of the keyboard case with this ribbon cable here going to this top controller board that then sends everything to the motherboard. Now, one thing that you will note at a glance is that the keyboard itself has all of these cables adhered to the back. So if you are replacing the keyboard, you're going to have to be very, very careful with the removal of those cables. It's going to be a delicate operation. It's certainly not an X240 keyboard replacement, but it is not going to be the most fun either. At any rate, let's move that off to the side because we've said everything there is really to say about that, and take a look at the battery. Now, this battery is obviously quite large. It takes up, I would say, the majority of the interior of the case. Now, these batteries can be tricky to find because of their age, how short the machine was manufactured for, and because it's the very first X1. If you have ever Googled or Amazoned or even eBayed X1 carbon parts, sometimes specifying first gen will help, but more often than not, it will actually make things more difficult. So if you are trying to find parts the easiest and quickest way, then what I actually recommend that you do is check the maintenance manual in the description, find the part number, and search for the part number itself. If you go into searching for first-gen parts, for whatever reason, there's either very few results or the results are very difficult to find, at least in my experience. Your mileage may vary. At any rate, if we take a look on the inside, there's really only two removable modules. We do have your Wi-Fi card hanging out here, and then your proprietary SSD. As I said, this is a specific length. You can get adapter cards that will allow other things to fit in there, but realistically, that's what you're looking at. Your CPU is under here, your RAM is soldered up here, and that's pretty much it. Realistically, the only thing that you would be opening this laptop to do other than to clean it or swap out the battery would be to do an SSD upgrade, and that is about it. There is not a whole lot going on here. This was certainly the beginning of the experiment for thin, light, and not necessarily upgradable parts. At any rate, let's go ahead and reassemble the unit and just give a very quick and brief tour of what the interface is like running. Alright, now that we have the unit back together, let's go ahead and power it on. Unfortunately, this one has a finicky screen, to say the least. So you will notice some artifacting, unfortunately, and that is just due to this particular unit's panel not necessarily being 100% operational. The experience with this machine is actually very, very good. Windows 10 is snappy, responsive, and the touchscreen is nothing short of a dream to use. The supple glass is very sensitive to touch input and allows for the hand to glide easily across the screen with very little resistance. Due to the matte display, it's also not anywhere near the fingerprint magnet that some modern displays tend to be. This is actually a very intuitive and very nice device to use. And as we can see, the specs on this particular unit are pretty mid-tier. This is the 3537U, running 4 gigabytes of RAM. While this might not necessarily be the best machine out there for a person looking to purchase in 2019, if you are a ThinkPad enthusiast, this is certainly an important member of any particular collection. Keep in mind that if you are looking to maintain this as a daily driver, that parts might be rare and expensive. But don't let that dissuade you. Always check your local pricing, check eBay, check Amazon, and any other places that you would normally shop for parts, because who knows, you might be able to find yourself a really great deal. Because when you're buying a ThinkPad, you're buying durability and reliability 9 times out of 10. If you enjoy this sort of content, I'm going to leave the big 4 here at the bottom. Please like the video, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so when the next part of the X1 series shows up, you will be the first to know. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below, and I will see you next time.